You know, it's been a while since good old Sean Arthur Cox has given you a bedtime story, and that's some BS. Fortunately, today we're going to remedy that with the good kind of BS. BS with S.A.C. This thing is falling apart. I should get a new one. When last we left off, William and Bloody John, the pirate in a bag, had just managed to navigate the fifth realm all by themselves in a rowboat. So good on them. It was very dangerous, and they made it. Of course they did. The book isn't over. Why would they die before the end of the book? That's not the kind of book. So we're going to pick up with chapter 11, Freeport. We're going to be maybe halfway through. Chapter 11, Freeport. Olivander sat on a bed in a seedy hotel room in Freeport, staring at what little remained of his things. The light was dim, though not for lack of a torch or the lateness of the hour. Outside the sun shone brightly, and the lantern on the bedside table burned with all its might. Soot, however, stained the lantern's glass, which looked as though it had never been cleaned in all its existence. The floorboards, too, needed no small amount of care. Each one was either splintered or warped or worked loose at some point, no doubt to conceal stolen goods. When a disinterested constable made his token searches. The mattress housed a small regiment of lumps, the product of years of disuse, hidden bodies, or both, and sleeping on it made Olivander's 50-plus-year-old frame feel its age for the first time since ever. To make matters worse, he had to share the bed with the hordes of fleas and bedbugs that made their homes in the mockery of a blanket that covered it. A dead body lay in the corner. It wasn't there when he checked in. The Drowned Rat was a classier establishment than that. Instead, it had sort of appeared in the middle of the night. Olivander felt fairly confident, based on the ham-sized, hand-shaped bruises on the neck, that he had put said body there. Everything about the corpse said thief. Poor sod must have broken into the room at night, either trying to rob Olivander because he didn't know who he was, or to kill him in his sleep because he did. Either way, without waking, the hero of legend had dispatched his would-be assassin, and now had one more piece of luggage to take with him when he checked out. Even at the Drowned Rat, the nicest inn in Freeport, housekeeping didn't handle messes like that. He really should take care of the body, he mused. It had begun to stink. He should grab his things, check out, and make his way to Barrow's End, to fulfill William's last wishes. But he couldn't. To leave alone would mean he had guessed wrong about the boy, that he was neither chosen nor special. It would mean the boy was dead, killed on a grand adventure way beyond his ability, a doomed trip which Olivander had encouraged him to take, and he simply couldn't accept that. One more day, he said. I'll wait one more day. He'll be here. And if he's not, I'll leave first thing in the morning. Tomorrow. But not today. Not yet. You don't think Longshanks will be there, do you? William asked. I live under my assumption that he's everywhere I don't want to see him, Bloody John replied. And I ain't dead yet, so, yes, I expect he'll be there. Think he'll be mad? Bloody John didn't reply per se. Rather, he laughed. A lot. William's stomach turned at the length of it. John's was a laugh of hopeless despair and naive optimism. William was doomed. And naked. Maybe I'll get lucky and I'll get taken in on charges of indecency, he said hopefully. John laughed some more. Not likely, and even if you were, city guards would probably just look the other way when Longshanks entered the jail to kill you. Good to know, William sighed, defeated. And what's your plan to avoid his bloody wrath? I plan to find myself a nice keg of ale and hide out till some thief steals the bottomless bag and takes me out of town with him. It's my bag, William said. And my own now's just gone and blown up me other one, John said. I think that gives me more claim upon it than you. I should have left you on the boat. The rowboat drifted further downriver, and they could see the docks of Freeport drawing closer. William disassembled the wooden grill and discarded every part of it but his crutch and the oars. He paddled the boat to the shore of the World River and moored it to a tree, then climbed out. What are we doing? Bloody John asked. Stopping, William replied. I have no intention of moving 1 foot closer toward that place until I have a plan. He laid one of the sleeping bags on the shore and sat soaking his leg in the cold water to ease the swelling. It felt good, soothing, especially in contrast to the warm rays of the sun seeping into his skin. The pain had subsided in his ankle, proof he'd only twisted it, not fractured any bones as he had originally feared. As he reclined on the shore, he realized just how exhausted he was. He hadn't had much opportunity to sleep, or at least not comfortably. He'd assumed he'd been in the bag at least a day before he realized where he was. The Fifth Realm stretched several hundred miles across, and from his perspective they passed through quickly. His stomach moaned in agony and intimated that it might soon devour itself if William didn't feed it. He had worked and fought and run himself ragged over the past several days, and had obliged himself a moment to rest. Barrow's End was in danger, and couldn't survive unnecessary delays. That being said, if William didn't get some rest and find Olivander, he wouldn't arrive at all, which would be much worse for his insignificant hometown. His stomach growled loud enough for Bloody John to hear, who ducked into the bag and peered out for wild animals. "Relax, John. It's just my stomach." "Course," John said, feigning indifference. "I knew that. I was just, looking for something. Oh, here's that rope I've been looking for. He reached down and pulled a bit of rope free and held it out proudly as proof of his honesty. "See? Don't suppose you could go and maybe track something to eat, could you, John?" "I could. What's in it for me?" "Food?" "I mean, besides that." "Well, I imagine I could find it in my heart to call your debt to me square." "What debt?" Bloody John asked incredulously. "You stowed away with me when the scalawag exploded. You hid like a small child when we passed through the 6th gate, leaving me to handle the business of saving our skins all by my lonesome." "Never asked you to do anything of the sort. That was all your own doing." "Fine. When we get to Freeport, I won't tell every single person we meet about how you were crying like a baby for your mommy." "You wouldn't," John said. He narrowed his eyes angrily and placed his hand on the hilt of his sword. William seemed unfazed. He didn't even acknowledge the pirate's unspoken threat. Instead, he kept casually picking at the grass as he'd done since he first sat down. He'd had too many life-or-death situations in the past couple of days to be bothered with one more. Every single person. They stared deep into each other's eyes, waiting to see who blinked, who relented first. "Who's your captain?" William asked with a sneer. "You're a dirty, rotten scoundrel," Bloody John said, and hobbled his one-legged body from the boat and into the woods not far from the banks of the river. William eyed the clouds passing overhead, savored the heat of the sun and the cool caress of the river on his swollen leg. He watched small silver slivers of fish dart through the currents, and he followed the lonely trail of an ant from a nearby tree to a hole further down the shore. All things considered, it was a peaceful way to spend his afternoon. His stomach growled again, so he sat up and pulled the bottomless bag from the boat. He tipped the enchanted backpack, letting everything fall out, and scavenged through its contents for a forgotten apple or potato, some speck of food to stave off the gnawing pains in the pit of his stomach. He didn't find anything to eat, but he did find something just as good, probably better. The twin bag. If he could reach Sally, he could feast. His mouth watered, remembering that first meal on the road with Olivander, the sandwiches and fruits and vegetables, and dinner, the potatoes and turkey and other heavenly savory delights. His stomach grumbled in protest, hating the teasing torment the memories brought with them. He cut a small scrap from the sleeping bag and dropped his fingers into the mud collecting in a tide pool. Then, with the urgency of a dying man, he scrawled a note of 4 simple, direct words, the exact opposite of his last note, and slipped the scrap of cloth into the bag. Sally and her youngest son tended to customers. Lunch was a relatively slow time of day for the Laughing Raven, and neither had much to do. Harry polished glasses and cleaned the bar, while Sally kept plates and pints full all around. Though Sally wore her usual cheerful demeanor as she served the guests, when she stepped behind the bar, away from customers, she made herself up with far more gloom. They had heard no word from William since his last sad and desperate note, and all evidence suggested the rather grave fact that the boy had died, sacrificing himself to destroy the scalawag and its foul fiend of a Captain Longshanks. His note hung on the wall in a space reserved for tributes to fallen heroes. Harry eyed it, eyes misty, from his spot behind the bar. Olivander, they knew, had taken it harder than either of them. He barely spoke when he called Sally at nights with the mirror, and she could see that he hadn't eaten or slept. He just sat, waiting for someone who wouldn't come. He was a shell, racked with guilt, and everyone knew it. Even Olivander. Small wonder, then, that a glimmer of excitement, a spark of hope, rose up within Harry's chest when a scrap of fabric drifted down from the upturned twin bag by the bar. He eyed it curiously, not wanting to get his hopes up. Even so, he had no choice but to shout with joy when he unfolded the cloth strip, and read the 4 words smudged onto it in muddy streaks: alive, naked, hungry. Ollie? Harry ran to show his mother. She dropped her pitcher, spilling beer and shattering glasses. She ran to the kitchen, shoving anything and everything edible she could find into a small sack. Harry, in turn, ran upstairs to the footlocker, where a set of mystically mended clothes waited for its owner to rise from the dead. They met downstairs, where Harry figured how best to fit everything into the bag at once, before deciding to send the food first, and follow with clothes. No sense in having them get soiled from eating too fast right after putting them on. Sally, meanwhile, called to Olivander through the mirror to let him know the good news. As they spoke, she grabbed the scrap of cloth and began scrawling a note on the back, letting William know that her husband waited for him in Freeport. Waiting? That figures, William muttered bitterly. Just sitting there, assuming I'll survive because I'm chosen or something. He folded the scrap of cloth up and slipped it into his pocket, resuming his meal. He felt angry, sure. He'd grown sick of Olivander's patronizing faith in him. Yes, so far the hero had been right. William had always survived, but barely, and not through any strength or courage or divine intervention. Half the time he scraped by because he stood up against bigger, stronger, more powerful foes who were blinded by their own might and simply didn't have the sense to see a poorly laid trap biting them in the tail. The rest of the time he got through things on dumb luck. That didn't make him chosen. It meant he was fortunate. Period. Unless, of course, good luck came with being chosen. All hostility aside, however, William let out a grateful sigh, knowing that he would soon be traveling with Olivander again. Or he'd be traveling with Olivander again very soon. For all his self-assured statements, Ollie had a good heart and a good right hook, and no one's luck lasted forever. When things got really rough, he would need someone to fall back on, or, if he could manage it, someone to shove out front. Bloody John stomped his way out of the woods carrying the most meager rabbit William had ever seen. The carcass didn't have much meat on it, by any stretch of the imagination, but the pirate seemed proud of it. William almost felt bad about having already made lunch arrangements. From the look on the pirate's face, the way it sank at the sight of the plate in William's hands brimming with food, John did too. "I saved you some," William said meekly. Bloody John sat in a huff, ignoring the boy. Instead, he drew a dagger from his boot and began to clean his catch. "It's good. Ham and eggs and cheese and bread. Some fruit." John kept at his butcher's work, skinning the hair and emptying the chest cavity. He found a small stick to make a makeshift spit with, and then stopped, dropping the rabbit to the grass, and his face in his hands. "No fire," he grumbled. "Here," William said, offering him the plate once more. "You eat. You've got to be famished. I'll find some way for us to cook what you caught." Bloody John grudgingly took the plate and turned away from William in a pout, shoveling meats and bits of bread into his mouth as though he would never see food again. "Fine," he said in a huff between bites, "but only 'cause I earned it." William shrugged and grabbed another stick, wrapping a thread pulled loose from the torn sleeping bag around it. Then he cleared a small area and filled it with dried leaves and bits of grass and a splash of that highly alcoholic wine from the endless skin. After some time, after John finished eating, the boy had managed to produce a small fire which he nursed to a healthy blaze. He then placed 2 Y-shaped branches in the dirt to hold the skewer over, slowly turning the rabbit as it cooked. "So where'd you get the grub and the clothes from, boy?" "I have connections." "And you didn't think to call on 'em earlier?" "No," William said apologetically. "No, I didn't think to." "Well, that don't sound like you at all." "How do you mean?" "Since I met you on the scallywag, seems like all you do is think and plan and scheme. You'd make a right good captain given more experience." "Thanks," the boy said, smiling. "But if I am thinking all the time, it's because I don't stand a chance against anything in a fair fight. I have to find some way to level the playing field. That or die. Well, that's what thinkers do. Sort of an arms race. Strong men race to bulk up their arms so big as no one can stop 'em. Little guys race to come up with plans to deal with guys with big, strong arms. William nodded his eyebrows and shrugged, then returned his attentions to the spit, rotating the rabbit over the heat of the flames. It smelled rich, savory, and smoky. He could hear the fat sizzling beneath the crispy skin, and though he'd already eaten, his mouth watered. Few things in the world tasted as good as a meal you made yourself. He removed it from the heat, borrowed Bloody John's dagger, and cut the meat into small, manageable pieces, which he placed on the plate from lunch. They sat the plate between the two of them, eating, each casually watching the river as they nibbled at their post-dinner snack. The sun had dropped from its zenith and dangled midway to dusk. Geese drifted along the river. Geese drifted along the river. A couple of ships passed by, bound this way or that. It was nice. And that's where we're going to go ahead and stop that section. As always, I hope you enjoyed. Tune in next time when Bloody John finds out who's been providing their dinner. Until next time, have good dreams.